Hi everybody and welcome to the video and live streaming show. My name's John Lacey and as always I'm joined by Sam Proof. Today on the show we're going to be talking all about podcast guesting, and I guess before we even get started, I don't want you to worry too much about what philosophically a podcast is, whether you're doing, audio or video or both or, whatever. Leave that to one side for today's discussion. Whatever kind of episodic content you're working with is totally fine. I see too many people hear hot takes about what they should be doing and just freaking out about that for the rest of the week, when really they should put their head down and create the thing. But that all said, we are going out live to all the various places, so I'm forever trying to make this thing happen. So if you are watching live, do hashtag Team Live, and if you're watching later on, you can do hashtag Team Replay. But Sam, how are you going? How's your week been?
Yeah, I really actually meant to think about this because I just don't know where my week has gone at this point. Like what I have been doing. Lots of cat stuff, lots of editing and things of that nature. So I guess pretty good. Like, I don't know. Nothing horrible finally. How's about you, John? How's everything with you?
Daily life is just such a blur. Like, I just feel like I'm so busy all of the time, and I'm not even sure what I've done half the time. But we just keep going and see where we end up, I guess.
You know what? I have to say, this is a weird segue, but unrelated to most things, I tried out a new feature on TikTok recently. I've seen this for weeks now, and when you go to leave a comment, gives you the option of add this as a post. And I was like, what does that even do? I've never seen anything to my knowledge that is that thing. So I tried it, and apparently what it does is it puts your comment, bakes it into the video, but it posts it to your channel. And then I got 370 views for somebody else's content. And I was like, I think that's good. I mean, I did 20 seconds.
Sure. We've spoken on previous shows about how often people will just, superimpose themselves looking at the camera while somebody else's content is playing. There's lots of weird things out there that you can certainly do and try. But let's check in with the chat. So, hello to Saeed, who's watching from Germany. He's still tired from last week's show when he was our guest here. Hello to Stefan, who's watching from Sweden. Hello to Raindrops and Ripples, who's on Team Live. Saeed says, can we agree on recorded conversations? I think that's a great way of looking at it. So that's certainly a good framing.
Yeah, no, I would say, yeah, I guess, because even if you're live streaming, you're kind of recording. But yes, anything we talk about today can be applied to live streaming, audio only, and video recordings. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So let's get stuck in because we've got a lot to cover today. So first of all, in terms of guesting, and I've got to turn that one off as well because I completely forgot it was there. I haven't had enough coffee, but I do have some live, so, that'll help me through today. Okay, so let's talk about it. So in terms of podcast guesting, I mean, obviously there are at least two opportunities. Do you want to be a guest on somebody else's podcast? Do you want to invite people to yours? Or potentially a bit of both? And Sam, I know we'll be talking about the things that we sort of do together and separately, probably as examples today a lot. But can you talk to us a little bit about what you do for just kidding around?
I mean, that's a very broad question. Do you want to narrow that down around? Yeah.
I guess more in terms of sort of identifying who you'd like to talk to and then initiating that sort of interaction.
Yeah.
We won't worry too much about all the other technical parts of it just yet.
Yeah. I think it's important when you're doing a podcast to definitely identify what your sort of podcast mission statement is and the voice of it and who those potential guests will be. And with Just Kidding Around, what we wanted to do was really put the spotlight on, educational content and some of the sort of myths behind different things out there, like nutrition and, litter boxes and litter. Some of the big polarizing things are like what you're feeding your animal and where that goes to after that's done. And things like that. TNR, which is trap, neuter, and return. And really a lot of stuff in the animal rescue world as well. So that is what we look for as far as guests go. And, we're not exactly looking for everyone needs to be a vet and an expert. There's definitely a place where informed influencers are a part of the fold as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to potentially get to know people a little bit before you just invite them on your show. We're going to talk
Yeah.
about some of the services that are out there in terms of matchmaking guests and hosts together. But I did actually put a bit of a questionnaire, a survey to people on LinkedIn this week. And the general consensus was that it was probably much better to sort of network yourself, form these relationships, and build some rapport. And we've been really fortunate, certainly on this show, that we're not going out to the internet and just saying, "Hey, who wants to have a conversation?" We already know people that do relevant things that we can sort of connect with and share on this show. So I guess, if we do look at our networks, whatever they happen to be, wherever they happen to be, I alluded to LinkedIn earlier, but like, who do you actually know and who is looking to share something? Do they have something to promote potentially? That's often a good way of getting them in front of an audience. I guess the other thing too is who's actually done a fair bit of interviews, because you need some equipment. You need to make sure you've got a decent pair of headphones, a microphone, potentially a camera if you're doing that as well, and sort of knows how to use them, because there's nothing worse than, talking, and it's a bit of a running joke that so many podcasts talk to interesting people about interesting things, and it's like, what does that even mean? What's the through line there? I need to know what you're going to talk about. It's going to help me out enormously. Speaking of talking though, let's just check in with the chat for a second. Hello to Business Growth Ready over on YouTube, saying it's almost May. The time bandits taking my time. Yeah, I don't know where the year has gone. It's funny. I think late December, early January, we sort of did a show about our goals for 2024, and I was thinking.
Yeah.
Actually, collaborating with people was one of my big ones. We've done a handful of things here, but I would definitely love to do some more. Hello to Strong the Third from the Huddle, who's saying good evening to us both. And, this is a great observation from Saeed, and I think it's fair. I see a lot of A as a guest on B's podcast. Next week, B will be on A's podcast. I think that's actually a really good thing to do if the audiences are shared, and I think that's what we're kind of looking for.
Yeah, for sure. This is one of the things that I refer to this kind of thing all the time. This type of collaboration was really key in the early days of YouTube, which led to the growth of several channels that are still on top, like Phil DeFranco and things of that nature. It was independent people making their own videos that got together to collaborate, that made what would become Maker Studio, which was like the first big YouTube production company. And it just started with this kind of thing. And it's because you can, sort of encourage those viewers to go to each other's, in this case, podcast, but, whatever the content may be. Collaboration like this is always a great idea.
And another thing Saeed mentioned was that as long as it's not the same conversation both times, and I think in some ways I agree with this, but in other ways it could be that the audiences are different, that they may not have been introduced to each other. And I see a lot of feed swaps. I see a lot of content being shared on both channels, whatever that looks like, whether it's an RSS feed or a YouTube channel. And often, with a new intro, maybe a bit of context. But the other thing that I've seen in the past is often there'll be a 2-part series, and you see part 1 on somebody's channel and part 2 on somebody else's channels. And again, it's that whole cross-pollination thing that I think we want to look out for.
Yeah, I mean, if it works for Marvel Studios, it can work for you.
Absolutely. So I guess the other thing, and I hear this a lot, especially in the audio podcasting circles in which I sort of run vaguely. Often people are looking for those big name guests, those celebrities, or at least the celebrities in their particular field that are a little bit better known.
Yep.
And I don't know, to me that always feels like a bit of a trap, because if they are really in demand, they'll be doing hundreds of shows. They won't necessarily promote what they've created with you, with their audience. And I think in a lot of ways, what I'm really looking out for are peers, people at a similar level to me at the moment, who may be doing slightly different things, but there's some sort of through line that sort of connects us. So I guess, how do you think about that, Sam?
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. That's what I kind of look for as well, as people who have the sort of same level of following as I do, and all of that. Because honestly, like, yeah, I think when you are either a guest or the host, there should be a good amount of the ability to promote that other person. Whichever side of it you're on, you should be able to do that to some extent, in the show and out of the show on just social media in general. And yeah, a lot of those like bigger names are probably going to charge money and then probably not going to offer that kind of thing. So it can often be a lose-lose for, someone going in, over their head, if you will. But yeah, I try to stay in the pure lane as well.
Absolutely. So I guess in some ways we've certainly alluded to the fact, and what do you know, my
John's
camera's
out.
already disappeared. That's great.
No,
And after I got the new batteries and everything, I thought this was
really?
going to be resolved, but unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So I
No.
might just quickly, for the moment,
Go to
geez.
promo.
Just want to say hello to Michelle J. Raymond, who's joining us as well. Good Saturday morning to you. We will go to a promo. I don't know that I'm necessarily going to be able to fix this camera, but I'm, as Said says, I'm potentially in podcast mode. And Walter is just saying LinkedIn is a great platform to network in bringing on guests. I was fortunate enough to have Benji Travis as a guest, who is the co-author of YouTube Secrets.
Nice.
Okay, awesome. So, we do have a number of different services and things that are out there. So it's probably worth exploring those a little bit. I'm going to, and again, I apologize for this camera. It's aging me exponentially, and it worked really well all week, and suddenly it's not working particularly well. So I'm going to try and do something in the background, Sam. But I guess first of all, have you ever used any of these services? I know there are some paid options and some free ones.
Yeah, so I have used, so we use StreamYard for our software, but they also have a sort of guest service called Collab, and it's free to join, and you can put a little profile on. I don't think, if I recall right, I don't think I've gotten anything off of it either way. It feels like a very small audience right now, and I don't know, with the recent acquisition StreamYard has had, if that's going to become, a ghost soon or not. It feels like something that could go away any day now. But it looks okay. I think if you've got certain topics, you'll find people, whereas I couldn't find a lot of people that were in the fields I wanted. But it looks okay, and it is free. I also have an email newsletter I am on, which is Podcast Guests, and I believe their website is podcastguest.com, and you can go there and again sign up for free. It is for both sides of it. So if you want to be a guest or you're looking for guests, they do sort of a featured group of potential guests every newsletter, and then a bunch, like a dozen or more podcasts that are looking for guests. And I believe to be a featured guest actually costs money, but to be a podcast, you just have to have banked 10 episodes or more, and he'll put you in that newsletter eventually. He's been doing that. I think his name is Brian, for a few years now. Early on, I definitely had a podcast in there, and I believe I found one or two podcasts to be a guest on through his newsletter. I honestly don't remember offhand. The other thing similar to LinkedIn is a website called Alignable, which is very much like a new hip LinkedIn wannabe. And they do have a sort of collaboration area. It's not quite as, this is for being a guest on a podcast, as the other two are. But you can definitely find those sort of opportunities on there. And I did find one or two, including, no, maybe that's not right. I've definitely found some podcasts on that. But in general, I tend to just like surf around and search the web and find podcasts that way. I don't think I overwhelmingly have a service that I'm like, this is the one, do it. I know John has Podmatch and Matchmaker.fm on his list. I don't know if he's ready to talk.
Yeah, so I guess those are services that are certainly available. And interestingly, like Podmatch, I think was the one I was looking at, and it has different price points whether you're a host or a guest or both a host and a guest. And some of those were I think $68 per month. You were American. Yeah. So I guess you'd really want to make sure that you were getting the most bang for your buck if you were going to do that for any period of time. Yeah. But again, I think it can be really worthwhile to think about who you've actually got in your network already. And, if you do find yourself in a situation where you want to extend beyond that, it's nice to know those services exist. But again, I think we need to be a little bit careful that we're not dealing with people that are too transactional, that are only sort of coming into our space to promote their latest thing. And it's not to say that they can't or they shouldn't, but I think, we need to make sure that they have other motivations as well. So that would be a really good thing to keep in mind, I would suggest. We're going to go and just have a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about some of the logistics in terms of podcast guesting and sort of arranging those conversations. Because, again, in fact, I'm not going to finish that thought. I'll tell you straight after this.
Okay.
We are constantly training our cats every interaction that we have with them. So when Johan would get on my counter before, this is 10 years ago, before I was the cat expert that I am now, Johan would jump on the counter. What was the first thing I did? I'd say his name, Johan. He loves that. That's a reward for him. He said, you just said my name. I would go over to him and I'd talk to him and be like, you can't be on the counter. Johan loves when I talk to him. Ding, that's another reward for Johan. I'd pick him up and put him on the ground, but I didn't want him to think I was mad at him. So when I'd pick him up very nicely and kiss him on the head and say, I love you, but you can't be here. I'd put him on the ground. I had just done 3 things that rewarded him for being on the counter. So I was encouraging him to continue doing that.
And that's a segment from Sam's podcast, Just Kidding Around, which you can learn more about over at cuteavalanche.com. This is the video and live streaming show. I probably need to point out the elephant in the room is that my camera is currently not working, despite me getting new batteries and hoping that would fix that during the week, but evidently it's not a thing, so I'll probably be static imaged for a while, so apologies for that. But that aside, we are talking about podcasting, so maybe it is that that potential collaboration between video and audio, the hybrid, as Saeed mentioned earlier. So let's talk about some of the logistics. And again, I almost went off on this rant before the break, but in some ways, especially as an Australian, I can't overstate the degree to which time zones and daylight savings really limit my ability to do all the things that I want to do, which is really profoundly annoying. So, I guess, first of all, working out whether something is possible, like physically, because I know a lot of people, and even Michelle J. Raymond, who was in the chat, I know that she's woken up at some really interesting times to have some conversations with people across the planet. I'm not really that great after about 9 p.m. Like, my brain is just already asleep, whether I'm physically asleep or not. That's just a thing that happens that I've kind of made peace with. But it's important to think about, whether you're in a position to actually, do the conversation well. But I guess in terms of logistics, Sam, obviously, daylight savings, time zones are a thing. There are a lot of great calendar apps out there that'll do the math for you, and I highly recommend that you let them, because it can be really, really challenging to do these things yourself. I know a lot of people talk about Calendly. I actually upgraded. I use what was Google's G Suite. I think it's changed names several times since then. But essentially, I upgraded to that, and it gave me sort of a booking calendar functionality within Gmail, which is really awesome, and we do use that for this show sometimes. Are there any particular tools that you use, Sam, to schedule your guests?
I actually do now use the Google Booking tool as well, just because it's my calendar's right there, and it's just part of it, so it's easier to get that sort of quick, reflexive sort of dynamic update to this is what my schedule actually is, and here's my available time, as opposed to Calendly, where I then have to go in and manually adjust that if things come up and I need to, like make that space different. The nice thing about Calendly, from what I remember, is it tied into IFTTT for automation, so you can have it do some things like automatically create like a specific Zoom link if that's the way you want to go with it, just for like that initial pre-interview, if not the actual interview. And you could have it add it to like your Google Calendar, not the other way around. But so that is cool. I don't think I've used any of the other tools, and I think when I was at Super League, they did all Calendly as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so can of course also be synced with Google Calendar, Saeed is mentioning, and also Rob is watching over on YouTube. I think if I wanted to get on podcast to promote my own show, product or brand, I might be interested in a service, and he emphasizes the word might. For guests on my own show, I might manage it myself, and I'm happy with that. And I think that's probably appropriate, because I guess the other thing that maybe we don't always acknowledge is that a lot of these podcasts, these video shows, whatever they happen to be, they are really labors of love. They're not necessarily business ventures. So I think you do need to be a little bit careful about forking out a lot of money in the events that, you won't be making any in return. So just keep that in mind as well. I guess the other thing, and I was kind of really impressed, Sam has sent me through his instructions for his guests, which we'll talk about in the tech segment a little bit later on. But I guess the other thing is, how can we think about setting some expectations up front? So, what is appropriate for the podcast? What is not appropriate? Are there particular points you want to hit that maybe your guest wants to hit? How do you sort of, encourage people to think about that and plan that into the process?
Yeah, so I think, I wish I had sent you these links before, but when I am first approaching a guest, and usually it's just an email or I've hit them up in conversation, I have two forms. So the first is sort of a official guest, locked in form that just kind of gets the basic information, and it also has the link to the booking tool so that they can go on and book it. But after that, I have a little more thorough, form that they can come in and fill out with like their social information if they want me to promote any particular channels, and any specific talking points they may have and things like that. So it's always good, I think, to have that sort of thing. And then they can always, email you as well after the fact. But anything to sort of standardize that process, I think, is a good idea. And then all of those are all Google Forms. So those all directly go into a spreadsheet for easy access, where I can just get all of those things from the, direct column and post them in if I need to specific OBS forms and things like that, like how they want their name on screen and stuff. That's all in there.
Okay, cool. I guess the other thing that maybe we didn't mention is that some of those booking services do allow you to incorporate extra fields and, maybe ask questions about, for this show, I ask people about their website, about a link to their LinkedIn thing, and any particular questions or any particular topics they would like to cover or share with our audience. So that can be really useful. And I guess the other thing about that is once it's scheduled, you talk about streamlining processes. The other really nice thing about that is you can let the calendar apps actually send reminders. And again, I kind of err on the side of too many reminders rather than too few, because leave them some time before you're going to start, because if somebody remembers they're doing something in an hour, that potentially gives them time to stop what they're doing, go home, turn on the computer, etc. Whereas if you just have one reminder that's like, oh, hey, you're doing this thing in 5 minutes, like if that's the first reminder they've received and they completely forgot about it, and especially if you're scheduling these things, months in advance, which sometimes happens, you want to make sure you give people these reminders. And again, think about the technology's ability to do that in people's time zones and adjust it for daylight savings and other sort of logistical things as well. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, and as Saeed is saying, yeah, let's promote your book for 60 minutes straight. Again, depending on your content, that may be appropriate. Like, if you're there to talk about the book, you can talk about the book. But that is sort of one of those running jokes that people say, as I mentioned in chapter 2 of my book, available now at Amazon and all good booksellers. That can be a little bit tedious, but obviously, there's a great opportunity to do that as well. I'm just going to put this on the screen and read it out. So again, Saeed says, I've been asked multiple times about questions I want to be asked as a guest.
Sure.
I have mixed feelings about that. It would be kind of guided self-talk then. I think this is an interesting question because I think, and I'm forever saying there are two different types of people in the world, and I think this might be another example of that. Some people are quite nervous. They want to have warning. They want to have planning. They maybe even want to rehearse a little bit. Other people are really happy to just wing things. And I think between you and your guest, you need to sort of negotiate what's most appropriate there. And like in some cases, some shows have the same questions that they ask the guests every single time.
Yeah.
So they'll probably already have a sense of what that looks like. But again, and I feel funny sort of articulating this on our show, but I feel like Sam is very chill, very relaxed, and I'm very neurotic, and I want to plan everything. And sometimes I just need to let it go and let it be whatever it is and let people take the conversation in different places. So how do you approach that sort of thing? Do you plan a lot? Do you just wing it?
So I usually actually have an idea of what the episode I want to do is. Like with the Kitten Cam, the Just Kitten Around podcast specifically, like I have topics that I want to tackle, and then I find the guests that I think can talk about that for like raw food and nutrition and all the misinformation about raw food therein. So I would already just have those questions. And then I would reach out to the potential guest and be like, this is the topic that I have. Are you interested in this show? And then we would probably do either some emails back and forth, and I would kind of go over, if there's anything they do want to talk about, so they would have that opportunity there. Or we would just do like a call, like Walter said, like a discovery call. So we talk for like 5-10 minutes, whatever, which also would act as a tech test generally. But I do also do a specific tech test time. But yeah, I think I have my sort of focus and my basis. And then if things go where they go, I'm all ready to like let the conversation wander.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you do, there is a give and take, I think, in that kind of dynamic. Like you've got to react to things because I'm sure we've all heard podcasts where someone has said something really interesting. And as a listener, I'm like, yes, please dig into that further. And you can tell that the person interviewing maybe hasn't even heard that. They're too busy reading the next question. So you want to have a bit of, to and fro there. Hello to CG who's joining us in the chat over on Twitch. Great to have your company. Rob asks, what do you think are the 3 best practices or pro tips for anyone who wants to book guests or book guesting opportunities? I think in some ways you want to, and I'll go to Sam on this in a second, but I think you need to let people know quite explicitly that you're open to this. And one of the things that's on my to-do list that I haven't done yet is to actually put a page on my website that says, hey, John is opening to speaking about various topics. These are the topics. This is how you get in touch with me. And actually, they talk about having sort of a one-page speaker promo to show examples of your work, whether that's you presenting or whether that's you being interviewed, and just letting people know that that is a thing. But again, the thing that Saeed sort of alluded to is those opportunities to go on somebody's show and then have them on your show. I think a lot of people are looking for that sort of that kind of arrangement. They want to introduce themselves to your audience and vice versa. So I think that's really worthwhile. Do you have any other thoughts on that, Sam?
Yeah, maybe. We'll see where this conversation goes. It's funny because like last year I I kind of made an early New Year's goal, like before New Year's was even here, that was my goal was going to be get myself on a podcast at least once a month, which I've been pretty good about doing. And, I've gone through a lot of the sites, but part of it is really just showing up in other podcast communities. And I don't mean like just showing up and being like, hey, I podcast too, like being a part of the conversation. You can ignore that bot message. For those, dang it. But yeah, like, I would go into like the StreamYard podcasts, which were live streams. A lot of the ones I frequent are live streams as well, and just talk to those people, in their streams. And, I was a big part of just replying to like other people on Twitter or Instagram and stuff like that who happen to also have podcasts. So eventually when I felt like they probably know who I am, I would reach out, through generally email and be like, hey, this is what I can bring to the table, So I think that's a big part.
And especially like if you identify those people that do only interviews, they really need people. They need to produce the content. Whereas if you try sending somebody an unsolicited pitch message and they never do interviews and it's completely solo show, that's going to fall quite flat, and they're going to think, oh, okay, this person doesn't know anything about me or my content. It's funny, during the week, somebody mentioned that an AI tool was sending out these pitching emails and for this male person, and throughout the entire email, it kept referring to that person as she and her, which, is the joy of AI. It often thinks you have 4 hands and 15 fingers on each hand. It's just great. People love it. But yes, I think, connecting with those people, and this is something I kind of struggle with a little bit, because podcasters want to hang out with other podcasters, which I think makes total sense. But in some ways, I need to know more about you than you have a podcast. Like, I need to know that podcast relates to my particular interests. Yeah, I sort of joke about being the only podcaster in the village and nobody else understands you. But then it turns out that there's another podcaster in the village and everybody in the village wants you two to be best friends, which sounds great in theory. But, one of you does a podcast on military history and another one does a lipstick podcast. And maybe you can bond on the technology and the promotion and the marketing, but, don't necessarily have a lot in common. So by all means, check out those communities, and they exist everywhere. They're on Facebook, they're on LinkedIn, even Clubhouse. I recently downloaded Clubhouse, which I'm sure people are surprised to discover still exists, because there's a show there that, they get together every night, every morning their time, but nights in Australia, and they have a conversation about a different podcasting topic. So just keep a lookout for that too. And the other thing too is look for these super connectors. And I sort of, there are certain people that are very social and they're very proactive, and they can introduce you to other people and give you an introduction. And as an introvert, I'm not really that person necessarily, but I know that there are lots of people out there. Even during the week, somebody sort of reached out and said, hey, do you want to be on more podcasts? I was just on this person's show. I can introduce you if you like. So again, I guess, I don't know if that was 3 tips, but those are some of the things that I would sort of recommend. But again, just reminding people that you're open to that opportunity, letting them know, as Saeed mentions here, that you have a podcast in the first place. Right. I think we get really self-conscious about telling people the same thing over and over again, but the nature of social media is so fickle that they probably haven't seen it the first time. So, you do need to keep reminding people.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, like, you have a community, like, ask them who you should have on your podcast. Like,
absolutely. Yes, so this is the video and live streaming show. Today we're talking all about podcasting and podcast guesting. So we're going to come back and talk about some of the technical options that are actually out there in just a moment.
And then I looked at the first assessment, and the first assessment was record a 5-minute video, and it was a pretty simple introduction of yourself. There was nothing exciting. I didn't have to research. It was just a 5-minute warm-up. And I freaked out That course is still sitting in the cupboard beside me. I see that stack of papers and I almost rock in the corner. It cost me a lot of money to sign up, and I threw the whole course away.
And that's a segment from my podcast, Build a Presentation Muscle, which is all about showcasing your expertise through content creation, whether that's video, whether that's podcast, article writing, what have you. You can check that out over at johnlacey.com. And I should put the banner up on the screen, seeing as I found it from the list. So you can definitely check that out over there. That was Michelle J. Raymond talking about getting over her initial fears of being on camera. And again, you know, this great success story. She's just spoken at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego, which is some distance from Sydney, Australia, I have to tell you. So we're really proud and impressed by her. And I just love her story because it is so inspiring. Sam, we're going to talk about tech for a little bit. And there are obviously a whole bunch of different platforms that you can use to actually convey these interviews, record them, go live, depending on what that looks like or what you're hoping to do. But I'm going to get you to maybe share this presentation and talk people through it for a little bit, in part because I'm stalling for time so I can put my camera back up and see if it's working now.
Right.
So I will let you do that.
Got it. Yeah, so I'll set this up with when I do the Just Kidding Around podcast, I have my guest use Video Ninja as a call-in, which is great because it works with OBS. Whereas some of the other things like, we've talked about StreamYard and Restream Studio and things like that in the past, they have sort of pre-created scenes. With Video Ninja, I can bring the guest in as a solo camera source and really adjust it however I want. It also gives me the benefit of doing like a local recording and things like that as well, and like isolated recording. So I send them a doc when they have been officially booked, and then John has turned this into a slideshow, so it looks a little different. But on the doc we have first, front and center the invite link, which we don't have in the slide because it's a private link. Video Ninja will let you create a specific link, sort of a vanity link. You can password protect it so that, it's the same setup every time. You can also sort of bake in a bunch of other options, but that's a whole other show. So we could do a whole show on Video Ninja and get into it. I tell the guests to check in and go through all of this stuff 10 to 15 minutes before the event. Sometimes I even try and get them to commit to a tech day before the show itself, which is extremely useful because you can suss out problems like, we're having today. Not that it always helps, but generally it does, at least so that you can see the difference, like how their setup is, what their sounds like and stuff like that. So you don't have to rush through everything in a 15-minute tech test. But yeah, I reassure them that even though they may see themselves on screen, they're not actually live until the event starts. Because for that particular show, we do a pre-show, which is just like a little game that everyone in the chat can play. So that's live while we're sort of in a green room behind the scenes, making things pretty and ready and getting everyone set to go. So yeah, I just make sure to reassure them about that sort of thing. And then they have all of these steps once they've gotten into video, and this will take them visually through that. So the first thing they're going to see when they get into Video Ninja is this sort of pop up to join the room. So I tell them join room with camera. Pretty obvious, I hope. And then you'll grant access via your camera and mic. So there's that screenshot right there. And just, select the appropriate devices. So I try and give them everything I can. This is a sort of guide to what we're looking for as far as what the image should look like. And then they click start, and then they're officially in sort of the green room area. This is a better guide on what I was saying here of how to set themselves up so that they are kind of matching me and my screen. For this particular podcast, we do both a sort of full screen of the guest at one time, so they'll see everything. But then for the majority of the face-to-face, it's going to be more of a vertical. So I give them these exact guides, which is part of Video Ninja's platform, is they can see these guides on their screen and be like, okay, everything in the center here, the center column is what's going to be 90% of the time. Good to know. So once they're in the waiting room, they should be able to see themselves and me. And if not, they should panic and tell me, which is that second part right there. And then I give them the link to the stream itself so they know where to go if they want to watch along. I should probably mention in here to tell them to mute that. But yeah, I think it's important that they know where they are going to be live. Actually, we've started multicasting, so I may have to revise that. And then finally, you give them some instructions on, social media stuff. So if we have particular tags that we're using, hashtags or username tags, that's all here at the bottom. And it's, I've tried to drag this out so that John had time to come on, but it's a really quick read. So it doesn't really bog down our guest with like, oh God, it's 30 pages.
Yeah, like it's only, I think it's 2 pages as the Google Doc that you sent me. But yeah. I do love this last page in particular because I think it does help to set some expectations about what you're hoping the guest will do in terms of their participation in, on social media in particular. So yeah. I really like that, and I think at some point we need to do a proper tutorial on Video Ninja because it's a really interesting option. So I just want to check in with the chat. Saeed is saying that he was a guest on a podcast recently. That person used Squadcast, never used it before, but kind of liked it. The pricing seemed fair, $12 per month, 1080p, 10 guests. So it's certainly an option out there. I must admit, and again, this was a really long time ago with a different setup, but I actually tried to interview Michelle J. Raymond on that platform, and I wanted to have a run through with somebody during the week, but I just couldn't find anybody that was available at that time. Ultimately, we got on there. My video setup didn't play nicely with that at all, so I kind of had to abandon it, and I think we ended up using Restream at that point, Restream Studio specifically. But I mean, there are plenty of options out there. The great thing is that, and think about these in terms of your technology know-how and also your guests. So again, you don't want to make it too difficult for them if they're not technical people. But that said, if they are super technical people, you can sort of get as nerdy as you want to be. And I love the way that Sam described Video Ninja. And it's a really interesting and completely free option, I should mention too.
Yes.
So if you're satisfied to wrangle with the OBS aspect of it, if you and your guest have a decent enough internet connection, I think that's a great place to start. But even StreamYard, Restream, they both have free options. So by all means, get in there, try them out, do your thing. Even if you don't go live, even if you record offline, just try them out and see if they're going to work for you. Again, we've done entire shows on those platforms and they are kind of changing all the time. So the other thing too is you often have the ability, if you do decide you want to use them, to pay either monthly or yearly. And you will generally get a better price if you pay yearly, but you're kind of locked in for that year. So if you're not really in a position to commit, just try it for a month. At the end of the month, you can make a call about what you want to try next.
Yeah.
Okay. So
very good, Saeed.
we kind of mentioned a little bit about the expectations, but again, and I don't even mention this to our guests because they're very much in the video space. They understand this, but a lot of people don't like wearing headphones for a variety of reasons. And I know there are sort of earbuds and in-ear monitors that you can use if you really don't want to have headphones on. You don't want them to interfere with your hair. You don't like the way they look. But the thing about this is if you've ever been in a situation where you've heard that audio feedback loop and, it just... I'll try to explain this as simply as I can, but the audio from the speaker hits the microphone and then that hits the speaker and then it hits the microphone. And again, it just reaches a point where it maxes out. It'll fry your ears. It'll hurt everybody involved. I've seen this in just Teams meetings. So the easiest way of fixing this is to actually wear headphones. So if you don't have a medical reason to not wear headphones, I want you to wear headphones. Though a decent mic is also appreciated. And I guess the other thing about the microphone is that I've heard lots of people, and again, this is probably more of a commercial podcast thing, actually send guests microphones, sort of the cheaper style microphones, just to get a better audio output from them. So it might be appropriate. They may not be appropriate. That's kind of up to you to decide. But certainly you've got those options. I guess, what do you recommend, Sam?
I was going to say, when I was working at Super League, we actually had tech kits that we would send out. It wasn't really podcast interviews, but hosts that we had emceeing different events and stuff. But yeah, they were like pretty decent. I think they must have been like $300-400 kits that we were sending people, including a mic and a camera, just so that they had control over it. But, Super League was a for real big company making lots of money doing stuff. And most of us don't have send tech kit money to use for our podcast. So really, the best thing you can do is just that pre-interview day, so that you can really check things out and be like, can you go sit somewhere different where you're getting better light? Or, do you have the ability to move the light? Are these all the microphone options you have? Are these all the camera options you have? Whatever it takes. So yeah. I also wanted to put out there that, there's tons of options for sort of the call-in software. You can straight out do, screen captures on Zoom or Discord calls. If you do use OBS, you can get Skype with an NDI plugin, which is, probably my second choice over Video Ninja for an OBS-based interview. So yeah, whatever's in your budget and your sort of tech knowledge level, like, it's all good.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there are so many great tools out there. Try them out, do your own research. But at the end of the day, I guess the only other thing I would say is, depending on the output you're prioritizing, some of these things are live streaming platforms with recording added onto them, and some of them are recording first. That may also allow some live streaming. I think Squadcast, and even Riverside fall into that category where you can go live, but I don't know that it necessarily gives you all the options for checking in with comments and featuring them on screen and that kind of thing. So it just depends on the kind of show that you're doing and the kind of input and output that you want to have. But certainly, the other thing too is, if you are interviewing people with sporadic internet, these sort of local recording options are great, because the quality may be downgraded for the conversation you're having in real time, but hopefully the recording that comes after the end of the show will be a higher quality. So again, if you want to take that into an editing situation, you can certainly do that. Dorkish over on Twitch is recommending you get a Microsoft sponsor if you are going to be sending. Yes.
Microsoft sponsor is good too.
And Rob's said that he uses Zoom as a service to bring the co-host and add the guest into OBS and then stream to YouTube from OBS. So that's another great workflow. And again, there are so many options. And I guess the other thing I would encourage you to avoid is, don't get so obsessed with finding the quote unquote right option that you just don't get started, because really, just grab the first thing that works for you and then keep using it until it stops working would probably be my recommendation. Or if you have a really compelling reason to try something else.
Yeah, it's the right now option.
Yes. And again, we talk about StreamYard, Restream Studio. If you are using the browser-based experience in those, it's just an invite button. So once you've scheduled your stream or your recording, you get a special link that you can send your guest. They'll come on, they'll nominate their devices, and you're pretty much good to go from there. So, I sort of say that we are blessed to have a lot of options, but I think in some ways we're blessed, but we're also cursed by those options, because it can be a little bit overwhelming. But just start wherever you want to start, honestly. Yeah. Okay, so this is the video and live streaming show. We're going to come back and talk about the things that you might want to think about after the interview has happened. So we'll do that in just a moment, as soon as I figure out which one of these to click on, and I believe it's this one here.
If you've been watching us for a while, or this is your first time and you're thinking, Sam, John, this is great stuff, but I'm wearing a lot of hats already and I don't need to add this to my list of things that I'm doing, but I really want to live stream. I've got you covered. I've been a freelance technical director and stream operator for 20 years, and I can help you either with one-on-one counseling, setups of shows, or even run your whole show for you. Get in touch with me, samproof@gmail.com, or find out more at samproof.tv.
And Sam can definitely help you out with those live production services, so get in touch if that is something you need. Just before we move on, Sayed does mention this in part because it's a useful tip, but also it's an excuse to make a cat pun. He recommends using the Cat5 cable to make sure that you're actually connected to your router and that you're not relying on the Wi-Fi, because sometimes Wi-Fi can be really good, sometimes it can be a bit sporadic. So again, anything that you can do to cut back on those risk factors of things going awry would be appreciated.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that have happened after the interview has taken place. And again, these might be a little bit different depending on whether you've done the interview live and it's just that standalone piece of content. It could be different if it's just a recorded thing that you want to go and edit or maybe just release unedited. That's kind of up to you. But again, the other thing I want to touch on in this segment too, but we'll come back to this in a second, is kind of the relationship building aspect of this, because you don't want to have a great conversation with somebody and then never talk to them again. That's not a great thing to do. But let's talk first, I guess, in terms of promotion. Like, once this thing is out in the wild, how do you recommend that we let people know that it exists and how they can enjoy and experience it?
Yeah, when when you've got the finished version and you've put that up, you should have like a sort of basic form letter that you're going to send people out and customize that for the person, give them the direct link to the podcast episode, or if it was a live stream, that particular area, whatever main landing page you want to promote, send them that one. Don't give them, if you multicast and then put it out on 20 different podcasts, don't give them all of the links. Give them one link. But also, much like that little section at the end of our initial, join our podcast page, give them that information of like, here are our socials and use these tags if you, post anything on there. And, I like to, tell them if I have other stuff coming up, because generally I'll put out extra content that points back to it. So like shorts and Instagram videos and stuff like that. I was on the Affluencer, which I hate that name, Affluencer podcast. And when it was all done, about a week later, they sent me a shorts video to post on my channel. And I was like, why have I never done this for anyone else? This is a great idea. I'm like, here's the short. Here's the title and description. It's low lift, right? Why wouldn't I post that? Yeah.
And I should say too, when I was on Michelle J. Raymond's podcast, she sent me a link to a SharePoint site which had multiple short clips. It had graphics. It had the recording. It had, I think, the transcripts. Like, there was everything in this folder. And she even sent me the individual recordings, which was something I asked for because I wanted to edit them, do my own versions of them, essentially, with my kind of branding as well. And I think, like, that's not going to be appropriate for everybody, but if you give them the option, they're much more likely to do something with it than not. And again, it's only because I'm a bit of a control freak and I have my own particular ways of producing videos that I made some of my own with that source material and didn't just publish hers. But if I was busy or if I didn't have those video skills, the fact that she'd done that and made that so easy for me to do awesome. was great. And I guess the nature of social media is you want to make sure you're tagging people and letting them know about this. Some platforms will let them reshare that. Some platforms will let them comment on that. It depends on what that looks like. But again, what you want to kind of avoid is doing the promotion that they will never see, because they won't appreciate that you've taken the time to do that. But again, sharing those resources with other people would be really, really worthwhile. But I just want to go back to one of those comments that you made earlier about not overwhelming people with too many options in terms of links and destinations, because again, this is another difference between Sam and myself, is that Sam will want to go out into every platform simultaneously all of the time. And I'm like, I'm just on YouTube and LinkedIn, and I might repurpose this later on somewhere else. So, you know, the thing about audio podcasts in particular is ideally you'd want a website that you can send people to with the show notes and a player built in and some subscribe options. A lot of people don't have the capacity for that. One thing I really do like is, and it's a relatively new thing, is called episodes.fm. And you can actually go and find your podcast or a particular episode of your podcast and share that link on social media. It'll give people options to like 15 different places they can listen to it, and they can click through and go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or, you know, whatever it happens to be. And the other great thing about that is that I think through the magic of cookies, it'll remember your preference and it'll default to that for future episodes. So I think that's really worthwhile, because the thing I often see is people just send the link to Apple Podcasts, and I don't use Apple Podcasts, so that doesn't usually mean much to me. So I just go and search for it in my podcast app. But I do love that as sort of a fallback option.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yep, cool. I just want to check in with the chat. So Saeed is saying, do you know beforehand when the episode will be published in the case of a recorded episode, and share it with your guests? So again, that's a great thing, because some people are recording the week before it goes live, and some people are batching these things up to 3 months ahead of time. So set some expectations, let them know when it is coming out, because there's nothing worse than when you feel like they've completely forgotten about you. And I've done interviews that have never seen the light of day, and in one case, I've got my own recording of one, and a part of me often thinks, should I just release this and just see if that person even notices? That's incredibly annoying.
I'm gonna say that I have started to like record my side of interviews, so that you can't hear the person ask me questions or anything. But I have those recordings of my answers, and if those are things that I can use and they never put it out, I'm gonna just chop it up. Like, it's there.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like in OBS, I've got a vertical and a horizontal recording of me, and on the Rodecaster, I've got my side of the conversation and Sam's side of the conversation on separate tracks that I can edit separately. So, it's great. Again, the biggest problem with all of this is just finding the time to actually repurpose the contents. But I guess the other thing, and we're sort of running out of time a little bit.
For sure.
But how do we maintain these relationships? And before I throw to Sam, I have this bias towards perennial content. Like, I don't want to follow trends. I don't want to tell you about the news of that week, because that stuff dates really, really quickly. I want to talk about general things that are perennially true. And the great thing about that is I can keep referring back to those episodes for the rest of time, potentially. Okay. And I think, sometimes we post once that we were on a show and we never revisit that again. I like to keep coming back and just letting people know that I was on something. Because again, due to the nature of social media, there's a really good chance half of the people I'm connected to have not seen that, don't know that exists, and I just need an excuse to resurface it. But how do you maintain relationships with people that you've collaborated with in this way?
I mean, I think with the just kidding around thing, because it's so informational and educational, like those are questions that come up time and time again, and I can just point to a clip and post it and tag that person, and be like, Samantha Bell from Best Friends. That's 2 tags, by the way. Animal Society said this about what to do when you find cats, in the springtime and no mom is around. And that's something that's going to happen every single year. So it is ready to go. Like, I have that clip better be the number one watched clip, going forward. But yeah, I think having a sort of running list of that sort of thing of like, these are probably things that I'm going to be able to use time and time again. Here are the relevant tags. This is when Sam gets in the spreadsheets. And here's a generic copy of what I might want to be saying in this kind of thing. And just have that ready. But also I like to just maintain, sort of my toe in the water. And like, if they have a podcast, if they have social media, I'm following them. Like the minute you've said yes, if I haven't already followed you, then yeah, you're a guest. I'm following you. That's going to be the way it is. And we'll interact on whatever platform, you post the most on, or I'll be in those shows if I can, audience wise. So yeah, just being active, I think, is great. Obviously you can't do that with 300 people or whatever, but you pick your favorites.
Absolutely. So I think, there's obviously a lot of things to potentially consider here, but I'm a big fan of just getting started and doing the thing and just getting feedback in that fashion. And certainly if there are people in your orbit that are your friends and your collaborators, support them. They will probably support you in return. That's a really worthwhile thing to sort of keep in mind and consider as you're moving forward. So I guess, first of all, thank you to all the people that have been watching live today. I don't know exactly, but I suspect, this might be a new live viewer record for us. I think so, yeah. We've done pretty well. So thank you to all those wonderful people out there. I know there's been a bit of growth on my channel lately, which has been delightful. So say you just said, so no handwritten Christmas cards to all your former guests. I'm disappointed. In some ways, like, we haven't really touched on this, but I know some people with a lot more disposable income than me will send personalized gifts and like, cutting boards and mugs and t-shirts and stuff.
Yeah, I don't typically get an address for my guests. I'm not usually getting that kind of information, but also I don't have the budget for that. But if I did, then yes, I would. Christmas cards, simple. Like that is something that I've considered doing on our Patreon for our normal members. So by all means, I would do that for a guest as well.
Nice. Okay. So again, Sam, as we start to wrap up, where can people find out more about you? What's your content? All that good stuff.
Yeah, head over to samproof.tv or scan this QR code. You can find all of my social links at the top left there. I am most active on YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, and Twitter. A little Instagram here and there. And if you didn't get enough cats today, head over to cuteavalanche.com or scan that one. And you can find our 24/7 cat cam featuring some really cute kittens right now. So head over there and watch the cats. And over to John.
And if you want to catch up with anything I'm doing, you can head over to johnlacey.com. I've got the podcast, a whole bunch of articles and things. And if you scroll down to the bottom of those pages, you can find me on social media. I mostly tend to hang out on LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you want to check me out there, that would be appreciated. Thank you so much for your company today. Again, sorry, I'm slightly distracted by the chat. So yeah, I just want to mention this from Walter before we wrap up. So I used to send my guest a customized thumbnail thanking them for being a guest. So that's nice. A great idea. There's a good chance you'll be creating those things anyway if you've got a video podcast. So I mean, there's nothing to stop sharing that with other people. Make sure you like and follow. Thank you, Saeed. We're always conscious of the fact that it's like ridiculously early in the morning for Saeed, so thank you for your company. Next week on the show, we're going to be talking to Garen Parkins from Desk Rig, and it's a company that sort of gives you all the tools to live stream or have virtual meetings with a sort of a rig that they've set up themselves. You don't need to figure out the technology and put that together yourself. They will definitely help you with that. But he wants to come and talk to us about OBS, and we look for any excuse to nerd out about that. So we are really looking forward to that one. So check it out wherever you happen to be watching. Don't forget to like and follow. Have a great week and a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon.